Oftentimes, we feel a little bit in these sort of discussions like part of a slinky dog. I don't know if everyone's had one as a child or at least watched, sort of Toy Story. And, in the case of the slinky dog, you have the head running ahead very, very quickly and the body sort of like sitting there waiting for something to happen, and then suddenly you get dragged, right? And I think in a lot of cases, what you see right now, or how we feel, is we do feel like as we see advances in research and quite dramatic results from some of the biggest and best companies in the world, the rest of us are sort of sitting here and feeling like we're about to get kicked in the ass, right? And I think that is sort of like, that question and that puzzle of what that means and what we do about that is one of the things that I've been looking and asking for the last 4 years along with Siobhan. And so, for the last 4 years, we've put together a number of increasingly bewildering and smaller type-faced landscapes of all the most interesting machine intelligence-related companies. And as we were talking about it this year, we realized that actually maybe what we need to do now is take a step back. And we need to do a number of questions around reframing. And so what this sort of 10-minute chat is actually about is it's an RFP. Because I'm doing a request for person for the Drucker, the Peter Drucker of machine intelligence. And what does that mean? Who is Peter Drucker? So Peter Drucker was a academic / consultant / journalist who a lot of academics don't really like, but for an entire set of executives for multiple generations, he provided context for how to think about the changing organization. And part of the reason he was able to do that, of course, was he had privileged access and insight into the best companies in the world. And part of what he also did is he provided meaning into what they were doing. And so for, sort of the aspiring executive or the successful executive, he gave them context for thinking about their work and how it changed. And I think that we are at a point right now where we need that person or set of people. And part of what's exciting about this event is I think that many of those academics / consultants / journalists are actually in this room. And let me sort of just spend a few minutes describing what I think are the current problems and what are the things that I hope they answer for me, either on Twitter or books or sort of whatever medium you choose. So there's a gap out there, which I think we all recognize, especially those who've come here, right? Which is, the gap is at the very most senior level, executives recognize that machine intelligence or AI is really important. And at the ground level, engineers realize that they need to get good at this, right? They realize that one, it's more fun to build. In theory, at least it's different. Two, you do get paid more if you put it on your resume. And so there's a nice little conspiracy that's going on at both the most senior and at the sort of like ground truth level of what's happening in corporations, where they all do want to work on machine intelligence. But there are a number of problems that, to be honest, just don't get discussed often enough. Like, what is it? And who actually figures out what to build? And even worse, like, if I spent all this money on big data, like, do I actually have anything useful? So let me just walk through what those problems are and what I think those challenges are. So first, I think that it is this almost universally under-discussed point between sort of the folks who are actually building things related to machine intelligence and the people who sort of actually fund it, which is that models are the core noun of machine intelligence. And, sometimes they call them algorithms, sometimes they call them, they'll call them, sort of like magic devices, or, they'll call them artificial intelligences, or they'll call them brains. But the important thing for, I think, most executives to start to realize is that models are the thing you should start measuring and the thing you start cataloging and inventorying and understanding in the same way that you used to understand applications. And critically, building models is very different than building software, which is really bad for me as a software developer because, to be honest, all my old tricks no longer work. More on that in a moment. There are sort of, the second part around it is like, there are no good methodologies. There's no waterfall methodology, let alone agile methodology around building machine learning models. And so we're sort of all really confused. If you go to Google, they've got some documentation, but I've seen it. It's not great. And also, even worse than that, when you actually deploy it, these models are not managed like the way you manage applications. And so understanding that is sort of a big gap. Even, but the good news about all that is that all that part is actually being solved, right? Because there are increasing numbers of people going after this problem who are interested in it. I've invested in a number of them. A number of my friends out here who are VCs have also invested in them. Come talk to us. We'll help you deal with that problem. But the real gap is a gap in either what you'd call middle management or product management. And in part because on the engineering side, we have such a poor understanding of what it means to build models. On the sort of product management side, there aren't really good ways for people to talk about, like, sort of what is the right place to invest and what is the right thing to do. And those people are actually the most precious people. So if you are a product manager who's built more than 2 or 3 models, you're incredibly valuable. Come talk to me and, we'll do something. But, I think that is entirely underappreciated. The other underappreciated thing is, like, as an executive, you spend a lot of money on some big data project. And I hate to tell you this, but even though the data is saved, oftentimes, like, you haven't actually saved the most important part of the data that you care about, which are the outcomes. And even worse, you haven't tied those outcomes to all the inputs. It's like one of those things which nobody actually does until it's too late. And even worse than that, your poor engineers will spend months finding that data, and they won't be able to access it. And then the data will be broken, or even worse, the data might be bad on purpose because, to be honest, the salesperson doesn't really care about good data into Salesforce, except to the extent that it affects their contracts, right? And so, or their commissions. And so that's a repeated problem. What's the answer? The answer is we do need methodologies, right? People are starting to put this together around sort of thinking about machine learning models and engineering, and we need methodologies for product managers. Another problem is ROI analysis is not sufficient. In the world that we live in now, you will make a bunch of bad decisions about which projects to invest in because you will do straightforward ROI analysis, you're nodding your head, right? And you'll do the wrong thing. And in part because, these models are probabilistic, and sometimes they're going to be right, and sometimes they're going to be wrong, and they're going to be wrong in different ways, and when they're wrong in different ways, they have different economic outcomes. Come talk to me about it. And it is one of those things which I think everyone who builds these models understands, and everyone who tells them what to do does not. And it's a huge gap. It's a huge gap. Two last ideas. One is, in a lot of the cases, the assumption is that the innovation should happen at the edge. That these machine learning things are nice and cool and off in the corner. That is a huge waste and a huge missed opportunity. I think the right metaphor, as opposed to introducing a nice new web application initially to interface with customers better, the right metaphor is not like a shiny little bit of paint, but instead, the right metaphor is to think about this much more like a merger. Right? That in effect, what you will be doing for the best companies in the world, you will be merging your existing organization into a parallel organization in which there will be lots of people and machines that do a much better job along a lot of your core processes, and you're going to have to make hard decisions. And that opportunity, I think, is what's most exciting. I think I'm out of time. But if you are the Peter Drucker of machine intelligence, come and talk to me. I'd love to chat. Or if you're just interested in this, I'm happy to chat more. Thanks so much.